For digital signal processing can be anything. The image that I've chosen here is of a robotic dog. That's why it's shaped like a paw print. There's a DSP chip that controls the motors that make the dog move. They're processing the digital signal. It's digital signal processing, and they're using it to control motors. It has nothing to do with audio, but that's the point. DSP is not just what we've always come to think. It is different. So we're going to start off by talking about our FIX product, and the FIX is an OEM integration DSP. That's all it does. Most of the products that we're accustomed to are also system tuning DSPs. The FIX is not a system tuning DSP. That we have a different product called the TWK, which we'll talk about a little bit later, unless you leave. Okay, so let's talk about what most products are. They're all-in-one approaches. They have integration product and tuning product in one can. One chassis does both. This sounds very convenient, but the truth is multifunction tools, like amphibious vehicles, may do multiple things, but it doesn't do any one thing particularly well, or at least not as well as it could be done. So an amphibious car, it's a car and a boat, but it's not a very good car and it's not a very good boat. It's convenient if you wanted to do both, but it's not a good approach. We've chosen what we call a modular approach. If you need OEM integration, you buy the FIX. If you need system tuning, you buy the TWK. This modular approach allows us to take advantage of the DSP processing to the highest level and get very focused on what we're trying to do. As a result, we gain functionality where others may not have it. I'll share with you some of those things. It also allows you as retailers or distributors to sell what you need and nothing more. So you can take the dollars that may have been spent and fold it into something else like speakers, subwoofers, amplifiers, or other things that can improve the sound of the audio system. This way your customer just gets what they need. The problem that I've always had is if you buy some competitor products and you're only doing integration, you buy the integration part, but now you have the system tuning that the customer never takes advantage of. But the processor is already built in and you've already paid for it. So we don't want to do that. We want to make a modular approach and only sell what we need. Too many features to get into all of it. I'll focus briefly on just a few of them. First of all, turn-on management. If you've worked with our XD V2 amplifiers, you know about the three methods of turn-on: trigger, signal sense, and DC offset sense. Same exact approach on the FIX product. The only wires you need, there's three wires you need: a battery, a ground, and some type of 12-volt trigger. That could be a wrap wire from the front of the vehicle to the back, accessory wire, or you can simply jump the 12-volt wire over and use signal sensing or DC offset sensing to turn it on. So just three wires to connect it. On the other side of the product is the inputs. The FIX82 has 8 channels in and 2 channels out. 82. 8 channels in, 2 channels out. The 8 channels of analog input, there's really only 4 rules that we ask you to follow. The first rule is regarding inputs 1 and 2. These are the channels that are used to sense the signal using signal sensing. For that, we recommend that you use mid-range frequencies. You can use whatever you'd like, to be honest with you. But depending on what your customer is playing, you want to make sure there's always signal in whatever frequency range you're playing. So for whatever reason they chose to use AM radio, there is no high frequency and there is no low frequency. So the processor may think that it's off and turn off. The truth is, it's very rare. You can use whatever you'd like. This is a soft rule. A more strict rule would be channels 7 and 8. These are subwoofer channels. OEM amplifiers for subwoofers tend to be very noisy. There's a lot of high frequency noise in the amplifier. They don't spend any money trying to fix it because it's a subwoofer. You're never going to hear that anyway. It only becomes a problem when you want to do signal summing and you take the low frequency and you mix it with high and mid-range frequency. All that noise now comes through the audio system and you hear it. So 7 and 8 have a low pass filter that eliminates the high frequency noise, so you want to pay attention to that. The last 2 rules are observing polarity and left and right. First on the observing polarity. What basically we're asking is make sure the little pluses are right and the little minuses are right. One of the key features of the FIX product is it can adjust time-related issues. It fixes time correction. And if you happen to invert the channel and change the polarity, it's going to see that as a time problem, and it's going to work really hard to put it back. So you've wasted horsepower of the processing to try to correct something that could have been done by just putting the wires on correct. So let the processor have the best chance for success and follow polarity. Left and right is a pet peeve. I hate when I get in a car and I hear left channel coming out of the right channel. That's annoying. So that's a little problem. The bigger problem is if you're inconsistent on how you connect the wires. If you're mixing left and right haphazardly, very often there's different time delay from left to right. And our processors will want to fix that. So we would ask to follow a normal convention. The convention we recommend is 1, 3, 5, and 7. The odd channels would be left. And and the other channels, the even channels, would be your right. You can do whatever you'd like, just be consistent. That's all we ask. Up to 30 volts of audio input, which is roughly 200 or so watts, which is unusual to find ever, so pretty much any audio system you can connect directly to it. On the output side of life, there's 2 analog outputs. That's the 2 part of the FIX82. This can also be sent out as a digital or toslink cable to go into either an amplifier that has a digital input. There's many competitor products that have amplifiers with digital inputs. We don't currently have one, but you can imagine. Also, you can send that signal into our system tuning DSP and keep the digital signal intact all the way through, so you don't have to go through analog and digital conversion multiple times. If you look, we only have left and right output, so what would you lose in some factory systems?
Fader.
You'd lose the fader. Let's talk about the fader for a minute. I have a very unique outlook on this. There's 4 answers to the fader question. The first comment that I would say is, you don't need a fader. You're not using a fader in the first place. The hell with the fader, forget about the fader. And if you send it to the customer would say, I don't even know what a fader is, but I know I have to have one now. So that won't work. The second answer would be, don't worry about it. We didn't change anything in the factory system, so I'd recommend keeping it that way. Use the factory amp, use the factory rear speakers. You still have a fader. Do you really care if the rear speakers are ruler flat and perfect? Because if you do, the third option is sell a second fix and a new amplifier and speakers. And you might think, well, that's expensive. But remember, my first 2 options didn't charge you anything. You didn't like those, so the third option would be you spend a lot of money. Fourth option is my favorite. It's this product instead. This is the FIX86. 8 channels in, 6 channels out. So you have front inputs, rear input, and a subwoofer input, and on the out you have front, rear, and sub. You maintain the factory fader, customer's happy, but I'm not. The reason why I'm not, I lose my digital output. I lose my digital output because the bit of code that we use is only 2 channels. Which 2 channels are you going to use? And if you're only using 2 channels, why didn't you use this product? So I like this product as a solution, but I think general sales, you'll do 80-20. 80% of your sales will be on this one, 20% will be on this one. This is about $50 more expenses too. So, but it's nice to have it. Again, sell what you need, don't sell what you don't need. All right, moving on. The signal summing has become a standard. We kind of needed to have this. Our old product didn't have it built in. This one does. The old one did 2- or 3-way systems. This one could do a 4-way system. A lot of Range Rovers and vehicles like that have 4-way systems. What we can do is automatically sum these signals together to create a full range level matched output. The output doesn't look very good yet because we haven't applied equalization. What I love about this is all of this is automatic. All of the level matching, all of the summing is done by the touch of a button. Takes about 30 seconds, which is pretty cool. I think you've come to expect this, and while this is a great feature, I don't think this is the exciting one. The exciting one is the time correction. Time correction is actually 2 aspects of it, and we're going to talk about both of them. First one is intentional time delay. A lot of OEM systems, they're putting in time delay to improve the way their car sounds. It's kind of like what we would do if we were tweaking this system. We would do the same thing. We would add delay to make it sound the way we want. But I want to remove that so I can tune the car to my taste, not what they said. So in order to remove that, I need time correction. Let's put that away for a second. The second aspect is something called comb filtering distortion. This can get a bit technical, but to be brief about it, comb filtering distortion happens whenever you have one signal that arrives in a place at 2 different times. And this typically happens through a crossover network. If you're trying to stitch things back together, there's a slight delay in the signal and it causes it to kind of sound goofy. In the electrical world, this is very audible, and I'll be able to demonstrate that in a moment. So let's kind of talk about this a little bit. You have the output, SPL, and frequency, low on the left, high on the right. Sub, mid-range, and high-frequency channels. A typical processor, like our old one, if it could do a 4-way system, the first thing it would do would be level match and bring everything in line so that they had the same average level. The next thing we'd try to do would sum them together, but when we do this, we notice these overlapping regions. This is what I'm talking about. There's 2 different sources. This, like in the case on the left, you have a sub channel and a mid-bass channel that are both producing common information, but there's a slight change in time. More on that in a moment. Same thing happens at higher frequencies. When we try to sum this, what we wind up with is a response curve that kind of looks weird. There's these little valleys, really sharp valleys. What's happening here is there's a change in time of what the signal processor is receiving. Now I look at something like that, and I want to fix it. This is comb filtering distortion. I want to fix that. So one thing I might want to do is say, oh, all I need to do is find out what frequency that is and boost it up. But this isn't going to work. Equalization doesn't work here, and here's why. There's pretty close analogy. If I have two subwoofers on a mono amplifier and I accidentally wire one out of polarity, right? So I've reversed the wires. If I play a 50 hertz tone, what's going to happen? One's going to go out, one's going to go in, right? And then move. How much bass do I have?
0.
Practically none. You'll hear some noises, but it won't be bass. But it's 50 hertz, right? So I find my EQ and I boost 50 hertz. What changes?
Nothing.
Nothing. Because you're changing frequency and it's time. It's time because what's wrong is actually they're moving opposite from each other. What you really need to do is pull this back so they can work together. Yes, sir?
Other systems which don't have the time correction look like this after summing?
Yes.
All of them.
Now here's why you haven't seen it in many cases, because you're probably using a standard RTA, something that's a 30-band RTA. What happens is these are so narrow that they don't show up on those screens. And it's really annoying because sometimes, like on an audio control RTA, you might see a light flickering, which means it's somewhere in that region, but it just can't figure out where. So that flickering LED, it could be a very significant spike, which doesn't seem like it'd be all that big of a deal, but it's incredibly audible. So, before I show you the audio demo, stick with me, don't leave. If we try again, now I'm going to show you what our processor can do. We're going to start again with the same signal, all those channels again, but there's the third dimension that wasn't visible before. It's the aspect of time. So when we show the time, you'll actually see that these channels were delayed relative to each other. This is again where this filtering comes in, this problem of time correction comes in. What the FIX will do, the first process is going to bring everything together in time. This will eradicate any cone filtering distortion and any time-related issues. Then it will do the level matching. So when we do our summing, you will end up with a much better frequency response. It's not perfect, but we still have one more step to do. So that looks pretty darn good already. When we apply equalization, you wind up with a very nice response. And it's flat, full range, level match, and most importantly, time coherent. If you tried to tell your customer about this, you'd lose them. I probably also with you, because it's not exactly exciting. What's more important is when you actually hear it. So I have a little demo set up here where I have that four-way system with equalization applied, all these fun things, so it's all filtered. I've run it through the FIX and I can turn off the time correction. This little button will explain in a moment. So the light changes as I press it on and off. The only thing that's going to change is time correction. The level match, the summing, and the equalization remains unchanged. We're only listening to a time correction change. Make sure my system's on. There we go. Signal sensing on the subs. So I'll go ahead and listen to this. And those little valleys that you saw, those tiny little valleys, they show up in key regions. You'll see that.
I'll leave with every piece of you. Don't underestimate the things that I
Pretty big difference. You don't need a light to tell you. Notice the vocals, where those spikes were at the top end, are drastically different. The sub bass is still there, but the transition to mid bass changes dramatically. I would recommend never telling anyone all about the back end of demonstrated. This is with the FIX, this is without the FIX, and it makes a big difference. And if a customer can hear that, I think it can really convince them that the product is worth the money. So let me talk about this little knob for a second. It's called the DRC100. DRC stands for Digital Remote Control. It's 100 because it's a single knob. We also have the DRC200. I'll explain this a little bit later, that in addition to a center knob, it also has an outer knob that can be used to adjust like a subwoofer level or something like that. More about that a little bit later. This would be a DRC 200. We're very creative with names. So a lot of factory audio systems, when you change the volume, it also changes the equalization. So as you turn it up, it changes. As you turn it down, it changes. If people want the pure sound, that's not the best thing to do. You need a master volume control. The DRC can be that master volume control, but they need a separate knob. A lot of customers want to use steering wheel controls. It's more convenient. They like that. So let me ask you, when the factory changes the equalization, as you turn the volume up, what happens to the equalization? Do you know? Typically the bass rolls off and the high frequency rolls off so that the factory subwoofer and tweeters don't break. So if that happens on our system, is that bad? Yes. Really? I mean, do you really want them to break the things? The point is that sometimes that equalization is not necessarily a detriment to the benefit of the system. If you turn the volume down, you tend to get the opposite effect where the bass and treble come up and keep it nice and full sounding. Again, this is not necessarily bad, but if the customer wants to get away from that, you can use a master volume control. The choice is theirs. This is sold separately. Pay for what you need, not for what you don't. The other feature that I like is what I demonstrated by pushing the button. This is the hands-free mode. A lot of that time delay that the factory puts in is intended to improve the intelligibility of hands-free speaking on the phone. When you're talking to someone, it removes echo and it makes the voices a lot clearer to listen to. Since we've basically taken all of that and thrown it out the window by correcting all that time, phone calls might sound goofy. So what you can do is you can turn off the time correction during that phone call to improve the sound of the phone call. You heard what it does to audio. That's not what we want, but we can bypass that temporarily. But one difference between what I've shown and what you'll get with the product initially is it's also a high pass filter that's engaged. It gets rid of the subwoofer. If you have someone with a really deep voice that's talking on the phone, the subwoofer is going to modulate and cause the microphone for hands-free to saturate and do goofy things. So during hands-free, it's high pass, time adjusted by the factory. And you bypass it, it goes full range, time corrected. So that's some of the benefits. Now what I did here today takes advantage of the last feature on the FIX product.
One thing, maybe in the future it's possible that you put some sensor on the unit, which when a phone call comes in, that it's, I think it must be possible.
We talked about that, but the factory is not giving any signal wire out to trigger that.
Oh, you have to find a solution for it.
Currently, this is the solution. We've talked about this. We talked about trying to find a wire that's only engaged when the phone call's on. There's no consistent path for that.
Okay.
The competitive product used to have a sense wire for that because they found a solution, but they actually pulled it off the product because it's no longer viable. So we're with you. We totally agree. If we find that solution, we'll implement it. I promise you. But we haven't found it yet. There's a USB port, which is not all that exciting. It's really for firmware updates. Allows you to go in and update the software that's inside the product. But it's also going to give you some visibility into the results that we've gotten using the processor. In addition to that, we're going to give you some very basic tuning elements, a 10-band graphic EQ per channel. Instead of talking, let me show you. So this is what you'll get when you plug in the software to the product. You'll be able to look in and see all the different colors represent the different input signals that you put into the product. So you see at the bottom there, the blue and the yellow on the far left, there's a white line that represents the sum product. You see that little valley right around the crossroad point? Why do you think that's there? What happened? Why couldn't we get that information? Someone didn't put the wires correctly, and we ran out of horsepower. We couldn't fix the polarity inversion. So the right thing to do would be take the wires and fix them, or you can hit the buttons in the program and it'll automatically change it. You recalibrate and that'll correct itself. To the right of that, you'll see the RMS level. This is what we had to do to level match all the input signals. And then here's the delay correction, how much time correction we had to do to get everything to sum. So you can see all of that. Beyond that, you have the tuning opportunity, a graphic EQ for left and right that can be linked together to do some minor adjustments. You're not going to do crazy adjustments, this is just minor. The truth is, we had a little extra power left on the chip, and we wanted to take advantage of it, so we gave you a nice feature. If you really want to tune the system, use the other processor. The goal here was you get a nice system in there, the guy wants minor adjustment, doesn't want to spend a hell bunch of money on a separate processor, we have an option for you. Charge him for labor to go in there and make these adjustments. On the 86, again, you have multiple channels. You have front and rear, left and right, so you can do all of that. This is also where you can change the high-pass filter and eliminate it if you wanted to do the demonstration. You could also use the DRC 200 for the volume control and subwoofer control, and you could affect whichever channels on the output you want, and you have the level controls there as well. And then, of course, the EQ screen, left, right, front, and rear. So that's what I have for you. There's a bunch of quotes here from people that really like the product, but because we're short on time, I want to click through them pretty quickly. Our goal is to have a go-to solution, priced competitively with great results that makes easy installation. And I think we've done a really good job of that with the product. The 82 is shipping now. The 86 will be a couple of months from now, and the software will be around the same time as the 86. Okay, moving on to the next product, which is the TWK. The whole modular approach really starts to make sense now. These are some of the features, and I'm going to click through it pretty quickly. You already know some of the stuff. You know about the inputs on it. It's got a digital input. It's also got a digital coaxial cable. You can take a digital coaxial cable and go directly into it. There's a lot of factory audio systems that have a digital coaxial cable plugged into their amplifier. Carries all the data that you need to actually do the system. So you don't need to fix that. You simply unplug it and plug it in here, and now you can tune it. So there's no need to do an integration because it's already done. It's a digital signal, which is fantastic. We also have 8 analog inputs. The product name is called the TWK88. 8 channels in, 8 channels out. There's also a digital output. This digital output would take all the information from this tweak and send it to the next one. So if 8 channels isn't enough, add another one. You have 16, and so on. As many down the line as you want. So you're pretty much limitless in how many channels you can connect to the system. Back to the inputs though for a moment. These 8 analog inputs, let's just say for example you're using a FIX82 and you're going to use the digital out to go into the TWK88. So you're not really going to use any of the analog things, you're only using the digital input. Based on our philosophy, pay for what you need and not for what you don't, we also now have a TWK88, a digital in only. All the analog connections go away. You maintain the same analog outputs as well as a digital output so you can cascade as you want. But by taking these off, we save about $60 US on it so we can lower the price. Pay for what you need, don't pay for what you don't. So it's a nice little solution for you. TWK88 is the one that I'm going to recommend more often than not, and it's not an 80-20, it's probably going to be a 90-10. The only real benefit I see from the TWK88 is if it's really price conscious. In the US market, you can buy the TWK88 and the FIX82 for about $640. And I don't think there's anything on the market that comes even close to the power and flexibility at that price point. So that's exciting to us in that regard. All right, so moving on, I kind of talked a little bit about this.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
If we don't need the input equalization or the summing, this one does not have the high-level input.
No, no. If you need integration, you need something like a FIX82.
Well, but if I don't need the correction, you know, I could.
So it's a flat response already?
Yeah.
You technically can take that, put an RCA end on the end of the speaker wires and go into it, depending on the input voltage.
It would work?
It would work, sure. Yeah, so long as the voltage was in right. I can't remember what the input voltage limit is. I had that information, I just can't remember it right now standing in front of you. But yeah, it's a lot like our amplifiers. You can go directly into our amplifiers, even if it's speaker wire, just by adapting it to RCA. I just have to find out how much voltage you can take for you.
Is this having also, I don't remember, does it have the auto sensing for switching on?
This one does not, no. This would be
okay.
a downstream processor, so it would be turned on by a previous product.
So maybe to have a cheap unit, you know, which can do the high-low adaptation and have the remote would be maybe a nice extra item.
There's tons of companies already making that.
Yeah, sure, but not JL.
It would be more expensive and offer nothing to the market that you don't already have. So. We want, if we're going to bring a product out, we want a distinction that makes it a JL product. We don't want a Me Too product. We want to say this is why we made this product. Time correction for the fix, simple setup is for the tweak. I'll show you in a moment. Project management, the way the files are all stored, everything's a computer file, as you would imagine. Connected to the computer, you gain access to the interface. We have project level files and preset level files. Each project can have 6 presets and a valet, so technically 7 settings that you can completely customize. What's great about it is they're stored separately, so if you wanted to drag and drop different presets into a project file, you can change that on the fly very quickly and easily. One of the more powerful features of the product is the fact that each preset is a global change. So any changes that you make, whether it's an input or an output routing, crossovers, equalization, time delay, polarity changes, whatever, level adjustments, all of these things, it's a global preset. Something that I like to think about is if I'm using a FIX82 with a digital out into the tweak, that would be, let's say, preset 1 for the factory radio. Let's say the factory radio doesn't have an iPod interface, so you can't get your iPod or iPhone to play into the system. Use the RCA out, how many millimeters? 1/8 inch, 1/8 inch out to RCA and go into the analog input, and that could be preset 2. So when you go from preset 1 to preset 2, you're toggling the input sources. One's an OEM source, one's an analog source, and you can do whatever you want with that and change that. If you have, let's say you're doing a system where you have rear seat entertainment, where there's some video monitors and you want the entertainment system in the back, you could have preset 1 be the main system up front and nothing in the back. Preset 2, nothing in the front, everything in the back. The volume controls can change, the levels all can change based on a preset. I like that. The inputs themselves, there's tons of flexibility. I'll show this very quickly. You have, in this case, you have a front, left, and right that comes through, and it's split into all of these channels. This is going to be for tweeter and mid-bass channels. That's what we're doing here. Then we have the rear channels that come in, go through, and go out to the rear channels. Then we have these tapping off. This is from the front, left and right, rear left and right that come through and go to a dedicated subwoofer output, non-fading. You can mix and match anything you could possibly imagine. If you've ever been to a concert venue and you see that mixing board with all the dials and knobs and everything, this is basically an 8-channel version of that. You can do anything you want, change anything at any point. It can be really confusing. Tons of flexibility, but we make it very simple to set up. equalizers in basic mode. There's 3 project modes: basic, advanced, and expert. In basic mode, the EQ is a 10-band graphic EQ, very similar to what you just saw on the FIX product. 10-band graphic EQ. In advanced and expert, you gain access to a 10-band parametric EQ. This is 10 bands per channel, so it's really 80 bands of equalization should you need to use that. The parametric EQ is far more flexible, but you can also screw it up a little bit too. So we put that as a more advanced tuning option for you. These can all be linked left and right or done separately. And this linked left and right thing applies to everything, so save some time here. By default, in most cases, left and right are going to be linked together. So when you make an adjustment to a crossover frequency or an equalizer slider or a polarity, it's left and right are both going to change at the same time. But you can separate them and adjust them independently. And once you make those independent adjustments, you can then link them again and make relative changes so they track with each other. And again, this is speaker distances or time delay, equalization, crossovers, level control, anything that would be specific to the channel, you can link, separate, and do relative on all of it, which I think is fantastic, personally. Crossovers themselves, high pass, low pass, or band pass. In basic mode, you have 12 or 24 dB per octave. In advanced and expert, you gain from 6 to 48 dB per octave, either Butterworth or Linkman-Riley, where it matters. Polarity reversals, everything I just said. Time delay, I think we handled this the right way. I love this because I don't like doing a lot of math. And here's what I'm talking about. When you enter the speaker distances, you simply measure from the desired listening position, like from the driver's nose to each one of the speaker locations in the vehicle. You can enter it in centimeters or inches. And you must include the subwoofer as well, which is usually the longest dimension. So once you enter all of these in, the processing power is going to automatically calibrate the distances, the time delay based on the longest distance, and delay everything so it all arrives to the location you desire at the same time. So that once that's done, you have the option to put in additional delay. The initial delay will be shown here. The additional delay is done here, and the total delay is shown over here. I'll show you what this means in a moment. These check boxes allow you to link the channels together. So knowing about the numbers, the left channels being 1, 3, 5, and 7. So let's just say it's 1, 3, 5, right? 1, 3, and 5. If I click these boxes, any changes I make here will apply to the entire left channel. So you can group them all together and apply delay to the entire channel. And you unclick those, click the other ones, and delay the other one if you want. The way I would tune a car is I do the basic dimensions to start off. I'd come in, I'd click the channels that I want to change, and I wouldn't even look at the numbers. I'd use the keyboard, the arrow buttons on my keyboard, and I'd just listen to it as I went up and down, and I dial it in that way. You can hold the shift key and do fine resolution, so it's smaller steps. And you could literally tune it without even looking at the processor, which I think is great. I tune by ear, not by eye. So anyway, signal management, I kind of talked all about all this stuff. Off of this, I want to show you it. I made a movie of the interface because the interface is not completely ready yet. So I just wanted to show a movie of some of the flexibility, and we'll talk about all of it. Before I get into the first part of it, the basic, advanced, and expert modes are intended to get the system tuned and out of the install bay as fast as possible. The drop-down menu options that we're going to have for the input and output. So basically, there's 5 input options on our menu. You can do whatever you'd like, but the 5 preset ones are going to be digital, using the Toslink input or digital coax, 2-channel analog, 2-channel with sub, 4-channel analog, and 4-channel with sub. That covers virtually almost every system you're likely to connect to the product. So those are your inputs. The outputs, there's actually about 18 different options that you can select from. So like if you had a 2-way system up front, coaxials in the rear, and a sub channel, that's one of the configurations. If you had a 3-way system in front with a center channel and a sub, that's another configuration. So there'll be a list of options for outputs. Once you select those, as you'll see, it automatically populates default settings, routes the signal, and does all the setup work. And it drops you into the tuning screen where you have a 10-band graphic EQ, you make minor adjustments and send the customer out. Less than a half hour to set up and tune a car. That's really good. If you want a more advanced tune, you'll click in the advanced mode and charge the customer additional shop time because it's going to take you longer to engage these more advanced features. By having it separate, it allows the retailer to have a conversation of why the customer needs to pay for that extra time. When you have an all-in-one processor that doesn't have levels, to set it up and tune it is one process. I've heard people spending up to 15 hours tuning a car. Customers will not pay 15 hours of labor to tune a car. But if you do this, that when you pay me to do this install, it comes with a basic tune. The car will be set up and tuned properly before it leaves. If you want a more advanced tune, come on in. We need a couple of hours, charge for a couple of hours, to go into the advanced mode and enact time correction and parametric EQ and some of the additional things. I could definitely make it sound better. It just takes me a bit more time. And you charge for that. If you want the expert level, we bill by the hour. Then that could take 15 hours. So you could have that conversation. None of the flexibility is really removed. It just allows a retailer to talk about why a customer should pay them for it. So with that said, let's take a look at the interface. The software is going to be called Tweak Tune, which is a creative name. And look, we're using umlaut, you know that. First thing you do is launch a project thing, and you basically name the project. This is Andy's Cadillac, by the way. So we enter information about the vehicle, the product that you put in it, notes about the customer, listening preferences, put in the installer's name, and you'll click the next button. When you click next, poof, you go into the setup wizard. We pick expert because that's how I roll. Here's your input options. Just select one of those. Just a couple of the output configurations. Select that. Inputs are named, outputs are named, crossovers, high pass, low pass, and band pass set, and the digital remote control assignments are done. And in advanced and expert mode, you then can enter in the speaker distances. We use inches because that's where I live. So you put those in, and when you're done, you click in to the next thing, and it goes into the tuning screen. In basic mode, the speaker distances you don't enter, you have no access to it. First thing I do when I'm tuning a system like this is I have tweeter channels. I'm going to attenuate them. They're almost always going to be too loud because they have dedicated amplifiers. Attenuate them by linking them and using the rockers or the arrow keys on the keyboard. You can do that again by linking any of the channels. To show this off again, you know how I feel about rear speakers. So in this case, I know I'm going to knock them down by about 8 dB. I link them together. They're both now attenuated by 8 dB. On the far right, you see you have high pass filtering, low pass filtering. I'm going to focus in on the high pass filtering. That 5K over there, I'm going to change that. I'm just going to make a subtle change. First thing I'm going to do is link the two channels together. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the 5K, and I'm going to change it to a whopping difference of 6K. So I put that in, and as soon as I hit enter, you'll see that both channels will be adjusted. No big deal, just kind of showing the flexibility. If you look over here on the right, you'll see these weird orange bars. These are what I call quick look frequency ranges. And you can see over here, this is only on the right side, so that's a high pass channel. This is band pass, it's restricting highs and lows. This is high pass again, and this would be low pass. And it's just an easy way of looking to see what frequency range is coming through that particular channel. Just a quick reference. To show it off, I turned off one of the crossovers so you can see the line jumped up, so the low pass filter's been turned off. When I re-engage it, default currently is 20K, that's going to change. So I'm going to come in and just change that, and you'll see it snap back into the way it was before. If that's just a little too weird, don't worry. If you click on the orange bar, it pops up a traditional view of the crossover so you can see the slopes. You also have the option now to turn on the other channels to see how they feather in together, so you see where the crossover regions overlap. You could also do this with all the channels. It gets a little crowded if you need to do that, but you have the capability of looking at all of that. Next up is going to be the equalizer. In this mode, since I was an expert, I have a parametric EQ. And the way this works is basically you left click with the mouse and you take and move the dot. As you move it up, it's boosting. As you move it down, it's cutting. Left and right changes frequency. If you do the right click on your mouse, you have the option to change the Q, which is the shape of that boost or cut. So I'm going to take level 6 here and I'm going to bring it all the way down. I'm going to take the Q and I'm going to go all the way up to the top and make it a really narrow, almost like a notch filter on that EQ. And then I can bring it all the way down and make it a very wide adjustment. You can see it affects a lot of different frequencies at the same time. This is why I feel that a parametric EQ is the absolute best way to tune a car. With a 10-band parametric per channel, I can tune a car faster and better than I ever could with a 30-band graphic, because to make gross changes like this over a wide band, you'd have to move individual sliders one at a time, and it takes a long time. Doing this, I can make weird things like this happen in just seconds as opposed to minutes or hours with a graphic EQ. Our graphic EQ we reserve for basic mode. Simple 10-band, basic adjustments, nothing too complicated. To really do an advanced tune, you use a parametric like I showed here. I'm adjusting both EQs, 1 and 2, because they're linked together by the white dot. I can break that by separate them and do 1 on top and 2 on the bottom. Or I can do 1 and 2 on top and 3 and 4 as you see here. I'm going to make some changes to the rear channels that are different, and I made them different because I wanted them to stand out. There's one thing I did by mistake here that actually worked out pretty cool. At the very end of the section, I'll take slider number 1 and I'll bring it down a little bit and I'll change the Q so it's really, really wide. And I like it because it's basically taking the bass region, even though it's already crossed over, but you can see how a parametric EQ allows you to make really big adjustments on the bass part of that, which I don't need anyway. I mentioned this before about the time correction. This is the automatic calculation of the initial delay. Now we're applying additional delay over here, and I link the channels and I'm adjusting both of them at the same time, and you can see both the total and additional delay changing at the same time. So now I've dialed that in. It's perfect for the driver's position, say, right? Next up, I want to talk about the preset. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the preset. I'm going to rename it because that's a goofy name. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm going to call this driver optimize, and I'll make a note saying that all settings are optimized for the driver. Now I'm going to copy that and duplicate that setting, and all those parameters are now copied over to a new setting. And if I hover over, you see my notes are still there. I'm going to come in here and change it. I'm going to rename it to front only. And the notes are going to say driver optimized without rear, because you know how I feel about rear speakers. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable this preset. More on that in a moment. So I'll select a color for the preset, click OK, and now I'll go in and select it to activate that preset. I'm going to go to my setup screen and I'm going to delete my EQs, which will break the routing to the rear channels. And I'll come over and say that these are not used, because in this mode I'm not using them. I'm going to go back to my tuning screen. You'll see that EQs 3 and 4 are no longer active, and our EQ screens over here are both 1 and 2. I can fix that by doing an overlay, and I have a greater window of opportunity. It's the same adjustment range, it's just easier to look at. So I'll make a couple of changes. Over here you'll see that it says not used. But if I go back and select the original preset, you'll see that everything's back in place. Both EQs are back, left and right rear channels are there, and 3 and 4 settings are still in place. If I go back to front only, it turns off those things. So you can see the power of the flexibility of the presets. The way the presets work are based on what the DRC200 does. So I said that you select colors. So this one's not programmed to work properly yet because I wanted to use it for a demo. The DRC200, when you press the button, it'll change the color of the LED. And those colors will correspond to what you set up in the preset window like that. So whatever color you selected becomes the color here. So it's not 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's red, green, yellow, whatever. So you pick that. What I like about it is that the method that we chose of enabling a preset and then activating the preset. If it's not enabled, it won't show up. So if you don't want all the presets active, it'll only be the ones that you've enabled. So if you're not only using 2 of the 6 presets, you don't have to scroll through all 6. It only scrolls through the ones that you've enabled. So it'll be 1, 2 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. It's a lot faster. So if you want to do some minor changes and compare one setting to another setting, just set up 2 of them, duplicate them over, make the changes, and rotate 1, 2, 1, 2. Very fast, very easy. The truth is, guys, there's a product on the market that can do a lot of these things. For our product to be successful, I need to give you a reason to try it. The reason to try it is you can set it up faster than any other system on the market. In basic mode, it's 2 clicks and you're done. Less than 30 minutes, set up and tune system out the door. Charge for the additional labor by going to advanced or expert mode. Your customer's happy, you're making money. Pay for what you need, don't pay for what you don't. That's what I got.
Thank you.
I went over, but you stayed.
Oh, well, yes.
Yes.